गुड इवनिंग, नमस्कार, जय हिंद। तहे दिल से आप सबका आज के हमारे इंडो टिबेट फ्रेंड सर्कल के एपिसोड में सबका स्वागत। मैं हूं श्वेता राणा और आप हमें देख रहे हैं NIN लाइव पर। मेरे साथ आज की मेरी को-होस्ट है मिसेस हिमांगी सिन्हा।
नमस्कार श्वेता, कैसी हैं आप?
नमस्कार मैम, आई एम वेरी फाइन मैम। इट्स एन ऑनर फॉर अस टू हैव यू हियर विद अस टुडे।
सेम हियर, सेम हियर।
जो चाइना का टिबेट में ह्यूमन राइट्स वायलेशंस के इश्यूज है, ये पूरी दुनिया जानती है। People talk about it, but nothing much is known about it. But here to talk about it with us today is Miss Tenzin Dawa.
Namaste. Thank you for having
Good
me.
evening, Ms. Dawa.
Good evening.
It's an honor for us to have you here with us today. We are indeed very lucky to have you here with us. Ms. Dawa is the Senior Program Officer at the Tibetan Center of Human Rights and Democracy, that is TCHRD, Dharamshala India-based Tibetan human rights NGO, working to defend human rights of Tibetans inside Tibet and empowering the defenders in exile. Since 2016, she has used research and advocacy to promote and defend human rights in Tibet. Ms. Dawa is also a rights-based facilitator and a human rights law fellow at the Human Rights Law Center, UK. Prior to joining TCHRD, Ms. Dawa worked as an intern at the NHRC in New Delhi, and she has a background in political science, human rights, and international human rights law. Ma'am, once again, a very warm welcome to you on today's episode.
Thank you. I look forward to the conversation.
Ma'am, Hemangi ma'am, I request you to please ask the first question.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Shweta. Ms. Dawa, tell us about TCHRD, the principle on which it is based, and what about its hierarchy and work done by TCHRD.
Right. TCHRD is in long sentence Tibetan Center for Human Rights and Democracy, and TCHRD is a Tibetan human rights NGO established in 1996, and we are based here in Dharamshala in Himachal Pradesh. And TCHRD works on protecting the human rights of Tibetans inside Tibet who are under the Chinese occupation. And the center also works on monitoring, research, and documentation of human rights situation inside Tibet. And every year, TCHRD publishes annual reports and thematic reports that documents the ongoing situation of human rights inside Tibet. And TCHRD also conduct capacity building workshops every year to empower Tibetan youth, women, human rights advocates, and grassroots leaders in the Tibetan community in exile. And like you've asked, TCHRD functions on the principles of equality, nonviolence, justice, dignity, courage, and empowerment.
Okay, fine. So, what about the hierarchy? What sort of setup you are having?
TCHRD, since its inception, we of course have, as an NGO, we do have a board of directors, of course, and then we do have executive director who sort of oversees the functioning of the office here in Dharamshala, and then of course we have the staffs. We are about 10 staffs, all Tibetan staffs, and we are responsible for our daily functioning of the office here in Dharamshala. And we also do have a branch office in the US.
US, okay, fine. So basically it is an NGO.
Yes, it's a registered Tibetan human rights NGOs run by all staff Tibetans.
Okay, fine. Yeah, Shweta?
Yes. Ma'am, you all are a research-based organization. So there must be data that you collect. What is the data that you collect? How do you maintain it? And what is the effectiveness of having that data with you? What purpose does it serve?
Right. So as you mentioned, TCHRD is a research organization, and we always make sure that whatever information that we put out as part of a research, output, we make sure that we make sure to always, verify the information with multiple sources before we make it available for the people, for the community. So, for instance, since we are a center that is located outside of Tibet and that works on monitoring and documenting human rights inside Tibet, it has become really challenging for us as a non-profit organization to independently, obtain information from Tibet because Chinese government is, working on all sides to sort of contain the information of human rights violations from going outside of Tibet. So that is why many Tibetans, of course, resort to keeping information to themselves and not sharing information with outsiders because in the past we have seen a lot of Tibetans getting imprisoned and sentenced to long prison terms just for sharing a
Yes.
photo of an incident that took place inside Tibet, or as little information that they share with outsiders. Outsiders, they are criminalized and subjected to long prison terms. So, which is
Okay.
why the very little information that we get, we always try to verify it with multiple sources, and then we only put it out. And on the other hand, TCHRD is, we as a center, we do have a political prisoners database. So since its
Okay.
founding in the year 1996, we have documented more than 5,000 Tibetan political prisoners. And,
All
uh,
right.
and of course, once every year when we have Tibetan former political prisoners who arrive into exile in India, we collect testimonies and information from them. So that's sort
Oh,
of how we collect our data from former political prisoners as well as from news outlets here in exile in India and also from multiple sources. Yeah.
okay, okay. So, how effective is TCHRD in curbing human rights violation by China? I mean, you are an NGO, so how you work? I mean, how
Right.
effective you are? Yeah.
Yeah. So of course, there is a huge void for Tibetans inside Tibet to express their grievances against the Chinese government because inside Tibet there is a lack of space for civil society to effectively engage with the Chinese government.
Yeah.
And because any form of political expression is criminalized in Tibet and they are
Yes.
stifled by the Chinese government, and because of which many Tibetans are getting unjustly sentenced and imprisoned for exercising their human rights. So, in order to fill that void that is in that lack of space for civil society in Tibet, we make sure to use the civic and the democratic freedom that we have in exile in India. And because of the democratic and civic freedoms that we are able to exercise in a free India, we're actually able to monitor and document and research and advocate for the rights of the Tibetan inside Tibet by engaging with governments, international NGOs, and human rights monitoring bodies. Because only when we advocate for Tibetan inside Tibet, whose voices are deliberately silenced by the Chinese government, we are here to make China accountable for all the atrocities that they are committing against the Tibetan inside Tibet. So, using the freedom and the rights here in a free country, we make use of our information and our research reports to advocate for Tibetans inside Tibet.
Fine.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Ma'am, I want to ask you this, that India has always been a friend of Tibet and the Tibetan cause. So, what role does India play in the smooth running of TCHRD? Any support that is provided to you in the smooth running of TCHRD by India?
Right. Of course, we are indeed very indebted and grateful to the Indian government. It is actually due to India's consistent generosity and kindness that we, in fact, the people of Tibetan who live in exile, have been able to preserve our language and culture and values that is very much being undermined by the Chinese inside Tibet. And it is because of the privilege that we have in India, because of the Indian government, we are actually able to fully exercise our rights and freedoms. And we are, because of the space that the Indian government has given us to us Tibetans, have actually enabled us to, independently work as an NGO and act as an advocate for the Tibet inside Tibet, whose voices are again, being silenced by the Chinese government. So we are grateful for Indian government for giving us the space, and and of course, with the stakes that India has in Tibet issue and the mutual respect and the goodwill, I think all Tibetan civil society in exile could actually, learn and grow by working together with with India civil society and the Indian government.
Okay.
Ms. Dawa,
Um,
what? Sorry. Yeah, Shweta.
no, no, no. You please carry on. I'll ask
Uh,
later. Not yet.
Okay, fine. Thank
Please.
you. What sort of violations are committed by China? What we hear or read in newspaper are the same. I mean, they are same or something else you want to tell?
Sure. So the Tibetans, ever since the invasion of Tibet by the Chinese government, Tibet continues to see repression from the Chinese government, and Tibetans inside Tibet are systematically being subjected to harassment, intimidation, enforced disappearance, and arbitrary incommunicado detentions, as well as long terms of imprisonment,
Mm.
basically for peacefully exercising their rights. And to
Yeah.
name a few violations that the Chinese government is committing inside Tibet, we can talk about freedom of expression. We can talk about China's Chinese government violating religious freedom of Tibetan inside Tibet,
Okay.
and
Okay.
Okay.
Tibetan also peacefully, assembling and carrying out peaceful protests are being subjected to, sentence terms. So there are all forms of violations that is taking place inside Tibet. And
Okay.
for instance, if I give an example,
Uh-huh.
in fact, in 2016, 9 Tibetans in Ngapa County in Tibet were actually sentenced to varying prison terms, ranging from 6 to 14 years in prison, only for gathering and celebrating His Holiness Dalai Lama's birthday. So these sort of basic fundamental freedoms exercised by Tibetan inside Tibet are being criminalized and subjected to prison terms. And on the other hand, China has also, in the past years, they have enabled a grid management system inside Tibet, where Tibetan villages are divided into grids, and the Chinese
Okay.
party cadres are being deployed in in these villages to monitor Tibetans. And if any Tibetan is found to be discussing anything political or anything related to His Holiness the Dalai Lama, or having any contact with outsiders like us, or even criticizing the Chinese government policies, they are being subjected to prison terms, because these government party cadres that are deployed in these villages, they often show up in civilian clothing. So it's very difficult to Tibetans to identify which one is a government official
Oh,
or a normal Tibetan.
Okay.
That is why these systems that have resulted, in a high level of self censorship even among Tibetans. So they're literally losing trust among themselves,
yeah.
and they're
Yeah.
resorting to speaking themselves openly.
Yeah.
So these sort of very pervasive and systematic policies and systems are being put in place inside Tibet by the Chinese government, which has actually made Tibetans very difficult to even exercise their fundamental rights, even peacefully.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Did you receive any complaint or any news about that younger generation is forcibly they are I mean they are taking them into that People's Liberation Army. So have you got any news or complaint about it?
Of course, yes, we do come across this information in the recent past a lot. Basically, what the Chinese government is doing is enrolling young children, young Tibetan children, into political education classes.
Okay,
So there
political
are
education classes.
education
That's
classes.
okay.
Yes, so
Okay.
they're starting these classes from a very young age
Hmm.
with the Tibetan children, and they're sending them to, military classes. They're sending them to legal education classes where they're being taught to be grateful to the Chinese government and, uh, not respect and show disrespect to His Holiness, and things like that are being taught in the political education classes. And even from a very young age, these Tibetan young kids are, you know, are, are stopped from learning their own language, their own
Oh,
culture.
Okay.
If you look at the Tibetan schools that are inside Tibet, many schools are instructed to be taught in Chinese language. So kids from a very young age are taught Chinese language, and they are not even allowed to learn their own mother tongue, that is Tibetan.
so did you
Correct.
get any support from foreign countries? Like in
Yes.
yours, just you're telling us that you send the complaints to UN. So did you get any help from UN or some other country
Of course,
regarding this? Yeah.
yes, we continuously, engage with UN human rights monitoring bodies and international governments, and of course, we do see a shift in a lot of, a shift in the stance from a lot of
Recent. Yeah.
international governments because of the Chinese, coronavirus pandemic, which has caused, havoc in all over the world. So there is a shift in geopolitical stand, and also like we regularly engage with the UN human rights body systems, whenever we receive any sort of information of a systematic violation of a Tibetan inside Tibet, we submit these cases to the UN working bodies,
Right.
and whereby which they can transmit these cases to the government of China, urging for their release and calling for accountability for their for their act for their illegal act against the Tibetans. So we always engage with the UN bodies and the governments. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, Shweta.
Yes, I was just going through the list of questions that we have to ask you here. Ma'am, a question that comes to my mind right now is that in any conflict that we see around the world, it is the women and the children that come into being the first victims of any conflict, whether we are speaking about any international conflicts that happen. So, what has been the impact of this on the women and children living inside Tibet at the moment?
Of course, yeah. In terms of statistic wise, it's difficult to come up with how much of women and children are being affected by these policies, right? But of course, as being for being a Tibetan nationality inside Tibet, they face all forms of discrimination under these Chinese government policies, and women specifically for they are doubly they're being doubly marginalized for being
Yeah.
because of the gender. So they're all we from whenever we do any research, I think we have to look from all angles, uh, taking into consideration the whether they come from a certain ethnic group or gender specific group, so things like that we always have to take into consideration. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So you have worked, with the NHRC here in Delhi, I
Mhm.
suppose. So what is your perspective of their working? How effective you find them? Yeah.
I mean, I was an intern with the NHRC. I think it was in late 2015. So at the time, I was in doing my masters in Delhi, and I had the opportunity to intern there. And while I was working there, I had a lot of experience. I got a lot of experience in looking into how NHRC approaches to cases that are being submitted to the NHRC, and the functionings and how they take up these cases, and how sort of the uh, uh, approach to these cases and things like that. And also from my time at NHRC, I feel that the commission is in fact has is supposed to be independent, and I think is working independently, which should work independently. But in the recent years, from what I'm seeing in the news, I think I mean we do see some concerning issues all over India with threats to the independent functioning of this NHRC and even the judiciary as well. So there are things that we need to be concerned about, and we should obviously keep a check on this independent functioning of these commissions and the government as well.
Uh,
Okay. Yeah.
One question that comes to my mind when I talk about atrocities is the self-immolation of monks.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
what is it that
Self-immolations
is
are
happening?
basically, if you look at the numbers, self-immolations are committed not only by monks, but we see a lot of Tibetan laymen,
Yeah.
young men,
Yes,
and even
Yes.
women
Yes.
taking
yes.
part in the self-immolation acts. So far, since 2009, we have documented around 163 Tibetans who have self-immolated for the course of Tibet, and they come from all walks of life. Some are monks, some are mothers, and some are even very young uh, children, as young as
Miss
19.
Dawa, I will interrupt you here. Do you? Your NGO does counseling with the people that they should not indulge in this immolation, self-immolation, and all this such sort of practice. It is not that effective. You are hurting yourself. That's it. Nobody cares.
I mean, it's not
I
like
mean,
nobody cares.
no.
You
You just
know,
tell me.
is
Yeah.
the self-immolation is an act that they are doing because there is an absence of space to air their grievances inside Tibet. Because peacefully, when they go onto streets to protest, the Chinese government, would arbitrarily detain the peaceful protester and then sentence that person to long prison terms. And then if you petition the government calling for restoring the freedom and the human rights of Tibetans, the government doesn't listen. In fact, they actually stifle their voices and being put to prison and tortured. And then we see all this collective punishment when
Agreed.
Tibetan expresses their
Agreed.
issues.
Yeah.
So self-immolation are indication of the fact that there is a space, there's an absence of space to actually engage with the Chinese government. So it shows the severity of the situation inside Tibet, and it should be seen as an indicator to the international community that the situation is actually worse and that we should be actually doing something for Tibet.
Okay.
But do you
Uh,
give counseling to younger generation, which is more into
Of
studies
course,
and going abroad
it is
and settling
impressionable.
down
Yeah.
there? They are not concerned about all these issues. What we feel. There is no
right.
this. Yeah.
I understand. I understand your your concern. Of course, we do not encourage any sort of self-immolation inside Tibet,
Of course.
and of course, we do and engage with a lot of Tibetan youths uh, outside Tibet to act as human rights advocates to peacefully engage with international governments and the monitoring human rights monitoring bodies in the international community. So of
Yeah.
course we do not encourage any act of self-immolation, but anything that comes from Tibet is an indication of the fact that the situation inside Tibet is worse, and
Yes.
yeah, we do not encourage self-immolation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What is the role of students in TCHRD? What role do students play in TCHRD? And what is the role that TCHRD also plays in the lives of students? On making them take their career paths or identifying with the cause that is so important to the Tibetans today. What is it that you're
Uh, Right. So, students are an important part of TCHRD's empowerment programs. So, every year, TCHRD engages in capacity building programs aimed at empowering young Tibetan students in the living in the exiled Tibetan community. So, every year, we
okay?
organize, a human rights workshop for students, and basically educating and creating awareness on the principles of human rights, and informing them of the current situation of human rights inside Tibet, so that they can become advocates for human rights in future. And also, one part of the TCHRD capacity building programs is aimed largely to the women in the Tibetan community, because
Yes.
women and children, they actually make up a large number of our demography in the exile community. And in order to create an enabling and an inclusive environment in the community that we have in India, we empower our youth and the women in the community. So every like I mentioned, these workshops provide them with the safe space to share their experiences. They have differing experiences growing up as Tibetan refugee and going to Tibetan universities, and then also learn from the experiences from each other for the betterment of themselves and for the society. So in the last few years, we carried out awareness campaigns aimed at eliminating gender-based violence in the Tibetan community, and we organized workshops on gender equality and women's empowerment for these women and the Tibetan youth, who are largely students studying in different universities in India. And we believe it's important to engage women and children and students, because when you have almost half of your population that are being neglected, and that gender based
Yes.
violence is not being addressed in the community, it's very difficult you know to empower them to actually do something that is on a higher level of human rights.
Yeah.
So we believe that when your entire community is empowered, then you can really fight full-heartedly. But when your half is, being completely suppressed and oppressed, then it's very difficult to work collectively for a larger goal, that is our nation's struggle. So we need to
Yeah.
inclusively and collectively work together to empowering all people from all group of the community.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Uh, Ma'am,
Ask Shweta.
your question? Yes.
No, no,
Uh,
I'm done.
I I wanted to ask you that no discussion on Tibet is going to be complete without speaking about His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So, what is the support extended by His Holiness Dalai Lama to TCHRD, and what are his guidelines about it?
I mean, His Holiness is the patron of TCHRD, and of course,
Great.
like His Holiness have always, talked about principles of non-violence and compassion. We, as a center, also function on the principle of non-violence and equality. So, of course, His Holiness encourages Tibetans to, especially young Tibetans, to be empowered and to actually advocate for for our brothers and sisters inside Tibet. So, of course, His Holiness is, has always supported the Tibetan government, whether it's the function of the Tibetan government in exile or any other Tibetan civil society that is functioning in the Tibetan exile community. So yeah.
That's very nice.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's very nice.
Ms. Dawa, we are very grateful to you for joining in with us today. You have spoken on so many issues that are about Tibetan human rights, and we empathize with the people inside Tibet right now, and also we support you in your work that you're doing for them from here. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining in with us today. We are very grateful to you for taking out your time and being here.
And
Thank you so
thank
much.
you from the depth of our heart for your continued support and your solidarity. We really, appreciate your solidarity. Thank you for support
Thank
once
you so
again.
much. Thank you. Bye
Thank
bye.
you so
Thank
much.
you.
Bye-bye.